Thank you, Emily, for joining us again. And thank you, everyone, for joining who is listening to this video or watching this video. We have a very packed session, and it's already pretty late for Emily, so we'll try to keep it short, but hopefully get through each of these questions that are floating around. There's a lot of new things in the immigration space, specifically US immigration space. And that's why I invited Emily and asked her like if she can spend some time and help us navigate these issues or questions that are out there. And I think this would be a very beneficial video for everyone who is watching, who is on a visa, green card, or planning to come to United States on a visa. So the first thing that we have on the agenda, Emily, is alien registration requirement, right? It seems that it was published on 21st March 2025 on USCIS website. And I'll paste a link and a snapshot. But what is that? Like, who needs to register? There's a lot of news that everyone has to register who has been here in the country for more than 30 days. But I want to hear from you and what's your guidance on that?
Sure. So I just have to say, because I'm a lawyer, none of the information that I talk about is legal advice. It's for informational and educational purposes only. But the alien registration requirement is actually based on a law that has existed since the 1940s. It's just that it hasn't been implemented or really, enforced yet until now. It became effective on April 11th, I believe.
Okay.
Yes, last week. It became effective last week. And USCIS published, they have a page if you're interested in looking at it, but they have a page about who needs to register, who is already considered to be registered, and who does not need to register.
Right.
I will say that there's some things that seem to be pretty clear about who needs to register and who doesn't. There are other things that are not. So, for example, and I have notes here because all of this is new to us as immigration lawyers, including you all, the foreign nationals who are affected and their employers and families. But the individuals who don't need to register include people like permanent residents, meaning green card holders.
Got it.
And also people who have, I'm sorry, the terminology is people who are considered to have been registered already. It's a technical term, but basically means you don't have to register. So green card holders, people admitted to the United States on a visa. So if you entered the United States on a visa, or if you were issued an I-94, so that's your entrance record that you receive when you enter the United States. People who have been placed into removal proceedings. I hope that nobody falls into that category because that's not good. People who've been issued an employment authorization document, and people with border crossing cards. Those are cards that you receive. A lot of Mexican nationals receive them to enter the United States. Who needs to register? So we just talked about who already is considered to be registered. Who needs to register? That includes Canadians who have entered the United States through a land port of entry and who were not issued an I-94. Because remember, you're considered to be registered if you were issued an I-94.
Right.
Individuals who entered without inspection. So that means if you entered the United States without presenting a passport, visa, talking to the CBP officer, then you would need to register. And then the part that is really confusing to me and a lot of other immigration attorneys and people in general is children who turn 14 years old while in the United States who must register within 30 days of their 14th birthday.
Okay.
So I don't understand that for a couple of reasons. One is because if you're considered to already be registered, like if you are a minor child and you have obtained a visa, you have an I-94, you're a permanent resident, you fall into one of those classifications where you're considered to have been registered. Does that mean if you turn 14, you still have to register or not? The other thing that's confusing is this is something that I think not many people realize, and I think is probably it's not widely enforced. But if you have a green card, if you're a minor child and you have a green card, when you turn 14, you're supposed to apply to renew the green card when you turn 14. So if that's the requirement, do you also have to register, or does applying for the green card serve as the registration? And nobody knows the answer to that yet, unfortunately.
So a couple of questions. So let's say, I think a lot of people who are on H-1B, maybe they have children in their home countries, and they come here on a dependent visa, right? So they definitely, as their age 14, they have to fill the form, register, and make sure that they are in the system. And the other case that you define that, okay, let's say the child is already a green card holder, but as they become 14 or like get their 14th birthday, they have to register in the system and also renew their green card. Basically, that's the entire. Okay, got it.
I mean, it's a gray area. Nobody quite understands at the moment, but yes.
That's the technical language is
Yeah.
okay, got it. And so in that case, I think let's say anyone who is entering on H1B, B1, B2, or let's say any other visa class where they have gone to a consulate, given an interview, got the visa stamping, they will be either coming through land or let's say through the air, and then they will face a CBP officer, and they'll probably get I-94. So those people don't have to worry about their length of stay and also registration, right?
Right. They don't have to worry about their length of stay in terms of registration. Of course, you have to pay attention to the expiration date if you're I-94.
Yes.
But yes, in terms of registration, it does not matter.
Right. So till the date you are admissible in the country, you can stay, but you don't have to worry about the registration requirement from the USCIS.
Yes.
So I think specifically, like if I have to read it, anyone, as you mentioned, that fall in that category that have to register has to go through that link and tell USCIS that they are registering, right? That's the whole idea.
That is what the law says.
And any kind of consequences that you can face if you don't register, or you register and then you can also face a consequence. Anything that you want to shed a light on?
Yes. So that's what we as immigration attorneys are talking to our clients about, right? The consequences of registering, the possible consequences of not registering.
Right.
We can't tell people, oh, don't register because it's a bad idea, because that would be against the law, and ethically we can't do that. So what we can tell you is if you register, depending on your immigration status, it could be a risk because you could be disclosing that you're in the United States without documentation. And it's possible, we don't know what's going to happen. You know, this is a very new, not requirement, but new implementation, execution of the requirement. So we don't know what they're going to do with the information in this database once people have registered. The other thing is the questions that they ask on the form can be incriminating, meaning they ask questions about activities where such that you could, if you complete, depending on how you complete the answers to the forms, you could be saying, yes, I have committed XYZ crime in the United States, which is a problem, obviously. The opposite of that, if you don't register and you're supposed to, if you fall into one of those groups of people that are supposed to register, if you don't register, there are criminal penalties for that. Okay. So it's something that I'm telling clients, like I said, the pros and cons of each. And for individual clients, I can really tailor the advice and say, if you register, these are the likely consequences for you in particular versus not registering. Right. The other thing to keep in mind, if a person does register, there are certain questions on the form that are required and certain questions that are not required. So that's something to consider if you are completing the form. The form itself does not require that you answer every single question. So that's something to keep in mind as you're completing the form if you're doing that.
Right. And I think maybe that's a very good point, because see, everything that we are discussing here is for educational, informational purposes, right? And anyone who is in that category who wants to register or has to register, I think they should talk to you personally or other attorneys and then take their decision, right? Because we don't know what are the other scenarios that are associated with that individual, and sometimes briefing on the general part may become people may associate to themselves to that particular general statement, and then that could become a problem.
Right.
So I completely agree with you that a personal consultation in this case would be a more straightforward way. But I think because generally on Meet Praneeth on this channel, most of our listeners are people who are on H1B, F1, or green card, or other status, or other work visas. So I think for them, if they have already gone through the consulate, they have got their biometrics, visa appointments, interviews, and I think in that case they don't have to register. So that should be, I think, very helpful.
That's correct.
And I think there is one more thing that when I was reading through it again, given my limited knowledge of law and immigration law specifically, so what I read is that you have to, whoever is registering or whoever is registered has to have the documentation of that registration at all times in their possession. So this is something that I was a little there's a great line. I was not sure what exactly this means, and I think this could be very helpful for people like on work visas or student visas or green cards even. So, do we have to carry our green card, or do we have to carry our passport with the visa stamp 24 hours or all times? Is that the statement that we have to go by?
Yeah, pretty much. So I'm not saying necessarily that you have to have your passport on your person, because that then you run the risk of losing it. But you do, as part of this, everybody who is a foreign national in the United States has to carry proof of registration with them, even those individuals who are considered to have already been registered. So that documentation can include things like your I-94, your visa, which would be on your passport, your if you've submitted documentation to USCIS receipt notices, potentially your green card, your employment authorization document, basically your immigration documents, which honestly is a good idea to have with you anyway. Right. But yes, that's part of this requirement.
Right. So I think that's a very good clarification. I think that's what, like, someone was asking me, reading it, I said, well, I am going to carry my green card because right. If someone stops me, at least I have a document to show that I'm legally, lawfully living here, right? So that makes sense. So I think, to sum it up, because this is one big agenda item of this call, to sum it up, and please correct me if I'm saying it wrong, but to sum it up, like anyone working on coming on a work visa, travel visa, or who has gone through the consulate biometric process of interviewing, registering, and then getting the visa, should not worry about the requirement right now. Anyone who falls in the requirement, I think you already mentioned that, and if someone feels that they have to register, then they should talk to you or other attorneys, take a consultation, understand your situation, and then take the action.
Yes.
That makes complete sense. And in terms of the position of the document, I think everyone who is on a non-immigrant visa or a green card should carry that document, like I-94 or a green card, to make sure, like, if someone questions them, they have this to prove that they're legally and lawfully staying in the country.
Right.
Perfect. So that clears a lot of things, because there's a lot of questions around that.
For sure. Sure. It's a confusing thing right now.
Yeah. And with that, let's move into the next topic, which also, I think, not anyone personally have reached out to me regarding this, but I've seen stories on Instagram, on other channels, and it seems that a lot of students, like also on ABC News, if you read, like, there's a section which says, oh, well, these many students got their visas revoked, or the SEVIS has been terminated by the TSOs. So, and I think recently when I was watching some videos, it seems that even with minor traffic violations, SEVIS can be terminated, or you can be in a trouble. So if you can shed any light on that, like if someone is in this situation, let's assume that Mr. John Doe was speeding, got a ticket, they didn't pay the ticket, or let's say they paid the ticket, or whatever the scenario is, and can they be in the situation of getting a service terminated, and what are their options after that?
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, this is happening around the country to hundreds of foreign national students.
Right.
And it seems to be, like you said, that the reason for, I think it's a weak reason, but anyway, the reason for the revocation of the visa and the termination of SEVIS is that they had some sort of, even, like you said, very minor, either a criminal offense or perhaps even traffic offense, even if they've taken care of it. They've paid the fines, paid the fees, had the case dismissed, did their community service, whatever it is, to take care of that infraction in the past. Still, it seems that these individuals, not all of them, but individuals are having their visas revoked and SEVIS terminated. So if that happens, so first the question is, how do you know if that happens, right? So it's possible that either the foreign national student and or the DSO, which is the designated school official at the university, would receive an email letting them know that the SEVIS has been terminated. I've also heard that DSOs have just kind of happened upon it when they're checking something in the system. So they're just, checking or going in to make a change or whatever the situation is, and they see, oh, John Doe's SEVIS has been terminated. So if you find that your SEVIS has been terminated, I do think it's important to take action as soon as you can. The question is what action to take, right? So right now, this is a relatively recent development, I would say in the past 3 weeks or so. But right now, the options seem to be to litigate, meaning to file a lawsuit, and we'll talk about that in more detail in just a minute, or to file for reinstatement. Sometimes people, and it's a reasonable question, but sometimes people ask, oh, well, can't I just change status to another visa classification? As of right now, I would say no. And again, every situation is different. But the reason I would say no in general is because if your SEVIS is terminated, that's considered to be a violation of status. And so you're no longer in status for purposes of changing to a different visa classification. So just in general principle of US immigration law is you have to be in status in order to change status. Yeah, so I'll leave that at that. So generally speaking, that's not a great option. Regarding litigation, there are a couple ways, a couple routes that you can go, and I don't litigate. So if anybody needs referrals, feel free to reach out to me. I have a list of attorneys in different states who are doing this. Some are nationwide, some are state specific. Anyway, so litigation refers to suing the US government for this. You could file an individual suit, or you could join a group suit. Sometimes that's called a class action, meaning a class of people, a group of people that are suing. There's already been litigation filed, and there have been at least a few temporary restraining orders that I've seen that have been put into place, meaning the government has said to, the court rather has said to the government, that's not part of the government, but the courts have said to the agency that's doing this, hey, you can't do that. But like I said, it's a temporary restraining order. The key word there is temporary, and it's while the rest of the suit plays out. So we'll have to see what happens there. If you are a foreign national student, even if you're not directly affected by this, I would try to pay attention to the suits. I know that's easier said than done. I mean, I'm a lawyer and I can't keep up with all of them because there's so many of them. But keep an ear out, because if there is a class action lawsuit, it's possible, depending on the terms of the settlement or whatever happens with the lawsuit, it's possible that would positively affect multiple people. There's probably going to be fact specific. It's not like, oh, we're solving this for every foreign national student who's ever had SEVIS terminated. No, that's not it. But it can affect a large group of people.
Right.
So I would pay attention to that. But like I said, you can join a class or you can file an individual suit. The other option is potentially filing for reinstatement, which refers to the process of when a person's SEVIS is terminated for any number. It could be terminated for any number of reasons, but in general, when a person's SEVIS is terminated, they can file to request for reinstatement, meaning request that USCIS or that the agencies reinstate, as the name implies, that they re-begin. Get them back into F1 status. So it is possible to file a request for reinstatement in this situation, but we as immigration lawyers don't know exactly what the outcome is going to be. And I'm not filing reinstatement cases either. I refer those out to people who file them all the time. And I don't, so I want you to be in good hands. But again, if you need referrals, let me know. But with reinstatement, like I said, we don't know what's going to happen with the reinstatement request. It's going to take several months to be processed, and at the end, you could get a denial. The other thing with reinstatement is the DSO has to recommend the reinstatement, and they may, and that would be great, but they may not. So it's not a definite solution for unfortunately.
Right. And I think this leads to one question that I was thinking about. Let's say when I was a student, we used to keep a track of email communications from the international office or the DSO office to make sure that we are following, like, all the records are up to date. And let's say someone gets, again, Mr. John Doe gets this email from the international office or the DSO saying that your service has been terminated and you have to leave the country immediately, right? And let's say that person packs their bag and goes back to their home country. Now, can they still be a part of this class action lawsuit or individual suit from outside of the country? Is it possible, or they once they leave, they're no longer eligible?
That's a great question. The answer is it depends, of course, on the terms of the settlement, but it's unlikely that they would be eligible because they're not in within the jurisdiction any longer. They're not in the United States.
Got it.
So that's a difficult situation, right? Because you don't want to stay in the United States seemingly without permission and not knowing what's going to happen, what the outcome of the suit is going to be.
Mm.
But like I said, if you leave, a couple things. If you leave, you probably will not be able to benefit from any positive outcome of the litigation.
Okay.
And if you come back to the United States, if you try to come back to the United States as a student, you would need to have the F1 visa stamped again, and you would have to have the I-20 issued. So you're still going to have this, it would still need to be reissued. It's still going to be a challenge that follows you, unfortunately. Even if you apply for a different visa classification, it can come up in the visa application, that you were here. And you can explain, you can say, well, they just terminated it, I would get some guidance, some legal guidance before you apply. Don't just go in and say, well, they just terminated it. I don't know what happened. But
Right.
seriously, that is, you can say it was terminated without notice for seemingly no reason.
Mm.
And see what happens. There's no guarantee, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the very interesting part, that there is no notice, right? It's like if you know that, okay, this is going to happen, you can take some action, you can talk to an attorney and understand what can be the next step. But if there's no time in between, then like for example, most of us who come here on student visas or work visas, any of kind of these emails are very frightening, right? Because we're always like, oh, we're following every law. Suddenly, what happened? Why my visa is revoked? And it can create a lot of emotional uh, sprung, right? And you're not sure what to do, and you might just pack your bags and go because you're like, okay, well, I'm
Absolutely.
here, right? So,
Absolutely. And I've seen emails from DSOs, some that say you need to leave the United States immediately. This leaves you without status.
yeah,
Others say you need to talk to an immigration lawyer. So I appreciate those DSOs who are encouraging students to talk to an immigration lawyer and really learn about their options before they take action. And like you said, I cannot imagine how stressful it would be to receive an email like that.
yeah,
So I know in the moment it might be just like, oh my gosh, I gotta go, and you pack up and go. But if you're in that situation, I encourage you to just take a deep breath and really think about what your options might be. The
right,
other thing is I've seen on LinkedIn a number of well-known, reputable immigration attorneys who are having sessions, free webinars and online sessions about this. So if you are a foreign national student, even if you're not affected, or if you are, check that out. Again, that's not legal advice, and they're not giving legal advice, but it's informative sessions about that can keep you educated, keep you on track about what's happening right now with the lawsuits and reinstatements as the situation develops further.
right. No, I think that's a very, very good advice because, first of all, the bottom line is follow the rules, make sure you're not getting into trouble, and then instead of scrolling Instagram, maybe go to LinkedIn and start connecting with attorneys and follow what they're doing, right? And I think you're right. I think even you do a lot of webinars, which sometimes are free, and you should just go and listen to it and see what exactly is going on in the space, right? Because let's say if not everyone has time to go watch the whole YouTube video, they can go and learn in these quick webinar sessions or even just connect and ask a question, right? So I think that's
Yes,
that's very important.
for sure.
And, thank you for so much for clarifying this because this SEVIS termination is something that's a lot of people may get worried and they don't know what the next step is, right? Because as a student, you're already around 18, 20 years old. You don't know what
Right.
the next step, and maybe you get confused and do something which is not good for you.
Absolutely.
And I think that kind of leads into the next topic, which is very well connected to students again. So I think a lot of international students who come here pursue, once they finish their education, they go for an OPT to get to a job or something. And recently I came across that there is a bill that has been brought in House saying that, well, OPT should be eliminated from for the international students, right? So if you can shed some light on that, like how feasible that bill would be? Like, would it become a law soon, or is it still in the debate? What's going on around that?
Sure. So the name of the bill is Fairness for High Skilled Americans.
Right.
Act of 2025. And it has been introduced in the House. So for anyone who isn't familiar with all of the intricacies of US government yet, or who are and fell asleep in that class in ninth grade, high school, whatever it was. Anyway, the Congress is the legislative branch of our government, and we have two houses. We have the House of Representatives and we have the Senate. For a bill to become a law, when I say bill, that means the draft of the legislation. So at this point, this particular piece of legislation is a bill. It has been introduced to the House, but it has not gone anywhere. So anyway, for a bill to become a law, it has to be signed, it has to be passed by both the House and the Senate, and then it has to be signed into law by the president.
Makes
And
sense.
then, it can, the president can veto it and it goes back to Congress. Anyway, right now, this particular bill is in the very early stages. It has, like I said, been introduced to the House, and it has gone to the House Committee on the Judiciary. So there are different committees within both chambers of Congress, and it's with the committee right now. So who knows what's going to happen? And that the most recent action that was taken was the end of March. Apparently, you can look online if you Google the name of this bill, and you can look on a government website and see exactly what's happening with it. Which is like not a lot right now. That's not to say it won't. But one thing that's interesting, and who knows, like I keep saying that this Trump administration has been very different from the first one, similar in some ways, but very different from the first one. But the reason I say that is because a similar bill has been introduced before during the first Trump administration, and it didn't go anywhere. I'm not saying, oh, don't worry about it. It's going to be totally fine. It's going to die. Don't worry about it. It's no big deal. I'm not saying that at all. Who knows what's going to happen, but hopefully it will not go anywhere. And right now, it's not super active. There's not a lot of activity around it that we can see at the moment. So I think if you're kind of making a priority list of things to worry about, it probably, for me personally, as an immigration lawyer who's trying to keep track of all of this, it's towards the bottom of the list. So again, I'm not saying, oh, it's nothing. Don't pay attention to it. I'm not saying that, but I'm more concerned about the visa revocations and travel issues and things like that.
So I think that's a great point, that keep an eye on it. And again, we can always make more videos once it gets to a different stage. But at the moment, it's still in house being discussed. So nothing much going on around the bill. Okay, that's a great point. And I think that leads us to the final topic. I know it's already pretty late for you, and I don't want to keep you. But I think we saw this happening previously as well, to give everyone a context. So in the last Trump administration, or the first one, we saw that there was an uptick in the employment-based green card interviews, right? So when we file for our I-140s, after those are approved, let's say you go for I-485, and this is where for employment-based, generally there were no interviews or very few interviews. Now there was a trend that a lot of people got asked for it. And it seems that trend is coming back in the new administration as well. So what's your feeling about it? Like, did you also see that trend taking a uptake, or people are getting called for interviews? If yes, any kind of things that they should be aware of and they should take care of before they go into the interview?
Sure, absolutely. So yes, we are seeing an uptick in employment-based interviews, both within my practice as an individual lawyer, and other lawyers across the country are seeing an increase in that as well.
Right.
I don't know of at least a public memo that says we're now requiring interviews for every single employment-based case. They do circulate internal memos, so it's possible that something has been
changed or something.
Yeah, that something has been changed internally. But yes, we're absolutely seeing them. I did see them some in the in-between years, if you will, from the first Trump administration, between the first and second Trump administrations, but not nearly as often as we're seeing right now. So if you were called in for an interview, employment-based interview for your green card, it's normal. It's not fun, but it's normal. It's part of the process. I would say the same, take into consideration the same types of things that you would for any other interview, meaning immigration interview. And I say that like everybody goes to immigration interviews all the time, but the same general principles apply, right? Tell the truth. Make sure that you have reviewed your documentation. Make sure that everything is consistent, that what you say during the interview is consistent with the information in your documentation.
Right.
It could be talk to your immigration attorney, of course, before you go. So if You are our client, whether we're going with you to the interview or not, we still have a preparation session before the interview to talk about the documents that you need to bring and what to expect before, during, and after the interview. It may be, depending on what has happened in your case, that you need to bring a form I-485J. That is a form that the employer, if you have an employer, if it's not an EB1A, for example, or NIW, if you have an employer, that they would need to sign to confirm that the underlying job for the green card process still exists.
Okay.
And that can be a little tricky sometimes. You want to make sure that you're working with an immigration lawyer for that, because a lot of times you started the green card process, in like 2010 or 2012 or 2013, depending on your nationality, a long time ago, your country of birth, a long time ago. And your job might have changed since then, and that can be okay. But you want to make sure that you meet the requirements for what's called green card portability. Or sometimes a person does need to, for a period of time, revert to the job that they had previously.
Oh,
or sometimes you can explain that a job, like a lawyer, for example, or probably a scientist or a software developer, you
right.
have the same basic occupation, but the skills that you have gotten better over time, hopefully, and the technology that you use has changed, and also responsibilities change. I have very different responsibilities now than I did when I started practicing 20 years ago as an employee somewhere. So those are things to keep in mind, but absolute number one rule is to tell the truth and definitely be familiar with what is in your application. When I say application, yes, the I-485 application, but also the I-140 petition.
Basis of this,
And
got it. Yeah.
yeah, so if it was an EB1A, make sure you're reviewing that. NIW, make sure you're reviewing it. EB1B, EB1C. And then if it's based on a perm labor certification, you need to be looking at that as well to make sure that everything's consistent, that you're able to give the information, portray the information accurately, that type of thing.
That makes sense. I think, and I think that's nothing to worry about. But if you're prepared and if you have the right documentation and you know what you've written and you're speaking the truth, then it should be straightforward. Okay. And yeah, I think with this, we are almost at the end of the session. And I think one thing that I would try to focus on again is, like, if you are in the situation where you have to register, talk to an attorney, you can schedule a consultation with Emily, tell the case and see what advice she has, because all of the things that we discuss on the videos are all educational and informational purposes. We are not giving any advice for an individual. And I think everything else, as we discussed, if you are a student, make sure you know what the next steps could be. Again, talking to an attorney, or maybe you can talk to Emily again to get a follow-up or some kind of a referral to a litigation attorney who can do a litigation. So yeah, I think being aware of what's going on in this space is very, very important right now. And I think it can benefit others as well. Like, if you come across an information, if you think this is a true source, right source, then forward it to other people. And also, don't share misinformation. This is another problem. We come across something and we think, oh, this is going to happen, and we just keep sharing it. I would say go to an attorney or go to some verified sources, read it up, and then share it. And with that, thank you so much, Emily, for taking the time. I know you're always there to help us, and please keep helping us so that we can.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy chatting with you.
Thank you.